Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another day in Vlogmas. Today we are going to be discussing all of the makeup releases that released throughout this past year that I personally am glad that I skipped. It's pretty much all eyeshadow palettes with the exception of like two. I almost was like, do I just do a video all about eyeshadow palettes? But there are like two actual makeup releases that I skipped that I'm glad about. That I'll be sharing in today's video, so we're just gonna roll with it. I selected makeup releases that like I was truly thinking about purchases rather than just like all of the makeup releases that I like wasn't interested, if that makes sense. Like everything that I'm going to be sharing in today's video is a makeup release that like made me do the double take. I was considering purchasing it, maybe it had been in my cart and I decided not to actually hit checkout, situations like that. So if you're interested in hearing about the 13 makeup releases from this past year that I am personally glad I skipped and why, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content or just chit-chatting about makeup, I would love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. All right, you guys, we're gonna start with, well, so I took a screenshot, like I was scrolling through all of Trend Mood to kind of like look back at releases. So we're gonna start with like most recently released releases I'm glad I skipped, and we're gonna work our way towards like the beginning of 2022. To begin, the first makeup release that I was certain I was going to purchase when they started teasing this, but I'm glad that I skipped, and we'll get into why, is the Glamlight Scooby-Doo collab collection. And as we chat about this, I have it literally pulled up on my computer, and as I'm looking at the pictures, I'm like, oh, but I do kind of and as we chat about this, I pulled it up on my computer and I'm like looking at the palettes and I'm like, oh, but like, ooh, only $12 with code Black Friday. Okay, is this video gonna take a turn for the worst? Because now suddenly I'm like, okay, Black Friday is over, but is it still gonna work? Use code shortcake for 20, oh, the shortcake collection. But the Barbie palette is $24 with code Black Friday. Like, is this still a code? Like, I feel like now I'm like, do I actually need the Rutro Raggy palette? The Rutro Raggy palette is $12 if I use code Black Friday, even though it's December. Well, this video is taking an interesting turn because I literally just purchased the Rutro Raggy palette, which was a palette I was going to discuss. Well, whoopsies. What I was going to say about this collection is Scooby-Doo growing up, did anyone else watch the like actual, not the cartoon Scooby-Doos? Like, I obviously watched cartoon Scooby-Doo, but do you remember when they came out with like the people Scooby-Doo? Literally, my parents could attest, literally my sister and I, like, I am not even exaggerating when I say we had to have watched that Scooby-Doo movie over 100 times. And I believe it was VHS that we owned, so it was like we had to rewind and like watched it so many times. So I have there's like a very nostalgic tie to Scooby-Doo. And when the collection released, I thought maybe I was going to purchase both of the palettes, and then I was going to come on camera today and say like, no, I don't need them, and like when I look at the swatches, like, I can do without them. But the Rutro Raggy palette, I couldn't resist. But I will say I didn't purchase the, what's the other one? Creeps and Crawls palette. I thought about adding to this order, but I didn't. This video has already taken a very interesting turn. Wouldn't have purchased it if it was the full price of $20. Although with shipping it was $19.99. Oh well. I'm excited for this one now because it kind of like, for some reason, it must be like the like periwinkle blue and then that matte like pukey olive shade like reminds me of the Butte Bean, like the first palette Butte Bean came out with Shroud Cosmetics. I'm getting like those vibes from the palette. It's really the shimmer shades that I'm like, ooh, and the periwinkle bluish matte. But Dang, all of those foiled shades. Okay, I'm very excited. Glamlight has a great formula. I'm literally just, this video has actually turned into me justifying purchases. Okay, well, let's get into the 12 then. The 12 purchases, or 12 releases that I'm glad that I skipped. Okay, moving on to this one from Urban Decay. Speaking of periwinkle shades, so the Urban Decay Robin Eisenberg palette, I feel like whenever, I'm gonna scoot over just a little bit. You'll see my dinky background light, just so I can put in photos. So this Urban Decay palette, I feel like whenever Urban Decay releases a new eyeshadow palette, like I'm instantly intrigued, always. And I've had some really good luck with Urban Decay palettes, but also some not so great luck. I'm thinking of like the Urban Decay Naked Ultraviolet palette I was so excited for, and that just like, I ended up decluttering that palette like just about right away. I think I did 3 looks with it, and then I posted it on Poshmark or Mercari because I just was like, I'm super let down by this palette. So when I saw this palette, I was instantly intrigued, especially because it's a little bit more colorful than we typically see from Urban Decay. And I thought that the like shimmer shades looked really beautiful, as well as that like periwinkle blue shade I just thought looked so, so pretty. But then I really got to thinking, and I was like, I've just been let down too many times from Urban Decay. Specifically, like I feel like I typically want more of like a punchy, high impact shade from them. And then it's more of like a muted shade, which makes sense to like the Naked name, if you will. So I ended up skipping over this one just because I felt like it, realistically, like I already probably wouldn't have reached for this. It wouldn't have been like an everyday palette for me. And I just feel like it would have been a little bit lackluster, or I would have been let down, or it wouldn't have been what I was looking for. I probably have a lot of these like shimmer shades throughout my even eyeshadow single collection. So I am really happy that I did decide to skip this. I haven't really seen this palette, like I haven't seen anyone review it or use it. So that's my thought on that. This next, so this is a face palette. This is not an eyeshadow palette. Dang it, my camera battery is gonna die. Okay, hopefully I have not moved too much. This next product is a face palette, not an eyeshadow palette. And I was like, this was like my top #1 thing I was going to buy during the Sephora VIB sale. And then ultimately I decided against it because I started to read the reviews, and I'm actually really happy that I didn't purchase this. But it is the Patrick Ta Major Glow Blush and Highlighter Palette. So based on the reviews that I was reading, it sounded like this, like the more shimmery or glowy blushes at the bottom actually had like chunky glitter in them. Not to mention, on top of that, I just don't reach for my face palettes as frequently as I do like a single blush. Although I will say I was much better at actually using my face palette collection this year. I did end up purchasing the NARS Cheek palette, the like star palette for holiday 2022, and I've really been enjoying that. So I'm happy that I just went with the NARS palette over the Patrick Ta, and I really have no regrets about not purchasing this one. Next up, I have the ColourPop Hocus Pocus 2 palette slash collection. So when I saw that they were releasing the Hocus Pocus 2 collection, I again was instantly intrigued. I've thought about purchasing the original Hocus Pocus palette many times, but for me, it really comes down to the reason I want these palettes is really for the packaging and like the artwork, rather than like the actual eyeshadow palette or color story inside. I'm just not super inspired by the color story. I don't feel like it would add a whole lot, if anything, to my eyeshadow palette collection. And when I really sit back and reflect, it just doesn't necessarily make sense for me to purchase an eyeshadow palette simply for the cute packaging. Like, what value does that actually add? So I'm very happy that I decided not to purchase the Hocus Pocus 2 palette. Next up, I have a Huda Beauty. It's rare is the day that Huda Beauty releases an Obsession palette or an Obsession like palette collection that I don't purchase at least one of the palettes from. And actually twice this year this happened. So up first, I have the Love Fest palette, and I thought that this was beautiful when this launched, and I almost went on and instantly purchased this. But then I sat back and looked at it, and I was like, truly, I have many of these colors or shades throughout my collection, and it's really just the 3 metallic shades, or like there's that marbled shade, that were drawing my attention, drawing my eye. And then I really got to thinking about how frequently I use my purple eyeshadows, and it's really just not that often. and I have purple shadows in my collection. I feel like around the time that this launched was when I was getting ready to do or just had done my eyeshadow palette declutter as well. And I ended up decluttering like the Aether Amethyst palette, which is a purple palette, because I just wasn't reaching for my purple shades. I also decluttered the Melt Cheese and Parties because I wasn't reaching for my purple shades. So I got to thinking about that and then ultimately decided not to purchase this because I already wasn't using my purple shades. Why would I then go declutter those just to bring in more, and would I really use them? So I am very happy that I decided to skip over that. And then sticking with Huda Beauty Obsessions palettes, we have the Color Block Party palettes. Now, for me, it would more so I would have been purchasing one or both of these just to, again, kind of add to my Huda Beauty Obsessions collection. But ultimately, I knew myself and knew that really I would create a few looks with this to review the palette, and then I would probably put it away and maybe reach for it a few times a year. And that again just really doesn't make sense to my makeup collection. I still have such a large makeup collection, such a large palette collection, but I really have tried at least to start thinking through using up more of my makeup, not necessarily just bringing in a bunch of makeup. And I love, love, love my palette collection, love to buy new palettes, love to try new palettes, but I want to make sure they're palettes that I'm not just buying for the hype to test them out and then review them, and then are they palettes that I truly will likely never reach for, or reach for so infrequently it doesn't make sense for my palette collection. And that's how I felt about this collection specifically. So I did end up deciding to skip over these. More eyeshadow palettes. Next up I have the ColourPop Set in Stone / Twist of Slate eyeshadow palettes. I have these shades a million times over in my collection, but I thought that the palettes were beautiful. Specifically, I really liked the Set in Stone just for like a more warm toned palette. And sometimes I fall into the trap of ColourPop because it's not as expensive as like say ABH, which this palette kind of reminds me of like an ABH style palette or a Color Story. Because it's not as expensive, I think, oh, like not a big deal, I'm just gonna purchase it whenever. And I really don't want to, again, add to my already super large palette collection just because a palette isn't that expensive, so I may as well just buy it. And really looking at this, I'm like, I literally have all of these shades in my collection. And I will say, I remember I was like, this was in cart, I was gonna buy, and then I talked myself out of it, and then I totally forgot about these palettes until I was scrolling through Trend Mood again to like prepare for this video. So truly that tells me like I didn't need the eyeshadow palette, and it's not a big deal that I didn't buy them. Next up is a hair product, so a little bit of a twist here. It's the Olaplex number 9, and this is the Bond Protector Nourishing Hair Serum. So I am a fan of Olaplex, but I've come to realize it's really just Olaplex number 3. Like I've tried the Olaplex number 4 and 5 like shampoo and conditioner, and they really aren't that special to me. I have gone through a full thing of the Olaplex number 7 hair oil, which was a good product, but just there's other hair oils I prefer over the Olaplex number 7. But when the Olaplex number 9 released, I was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. This sounds like a product I would really enjoy. I actually did end up getting a sample, maybe it's like a point perk or something, and it's a fine product, but for me, I just need the Olaplex number 3. That's all I want to spend that much money on when it comes to these higher priced hair products from Olaplex. So, and I tried I used up my like sample size, and it really was nothing special to me. So I'm very happy that I did decide to skip over this. Next up is the Pat McGrath Bridgerton collection. And for me, it was really just the eyeshadow palettes that I was interested in within the Bridgerton collections, the 6-pan eyeshadow palettes. And for both of them, when I look at them, it's really just like 1 or 2 shades that really have me intrigued or really had me interested. And then there were other shades in the palette that I like knew I really wouldn't get use out of. I was more interested in the like pink outer packaging palette, and the 2 like matte pink shades in that palette I don't think I would have used at all. Alongside like that gold shade, it's like, would I really have used that? Probably not that much. So then I'm spending like $60+ on 3 eyeshadows. Like that just doesn't make sense. And I'm very happy that I skipped over this collection. Next up, another ColourPop eyeshadow palette, and I really wanted this and had gone back multiple times throughout this year thinking maybe I would purchase it again. And really, I'm glad that I didn't, especially now as we're reaching the end of 2022. And again, I'm kind of having these thoughts of like next year, I want to really hone in on curating my makeup collection even more to just true things that I love and not having this expansive, overwhelming collection of makeup. So the ColourPop, I can't even remember what this is called, but the Lime palette, I love green. Just as a color, I love green eyeshadow, etc. And I really thought I was gonna end up purchasing this. Some of the shades in here kind of remind me of the Tinkerbell palette, and then I did end up purchasing, I'm looking at it, the Getting Fresh palette later. There were like 3 lime shades in that palette that kind of satisfied my urge for these, and I was really let down by the lime or like green shades in the Getting Fresh palette that I purchased. Also with these ColourPop like curated color palettes, like the 9pan very curated color store, it's like they're kind of like one trick ponies in a sense of like there's not a whole lot of variety of different looks that you can do. So I didn't need this palette, and I'm very glad that I skipped it. 3 more to get through, all 3 eyeshadow palettes. This one you guys talked me out of, and thank you for doing that. I'm very happy that I did not spend $65 or $67 on this, and it is the Natasha Denona Pastel palette. First of all, I feel like anytime Natasha Denona releases a new palette, I'm instantly interested. And this released around Sephora VIB springtime sale, because I had put it in my video that I was going to purchase it during the Sephora VIB sale at that time. This was like one of the products that like I thought for sure I was going to purchase. And you guys all told me like, you have other pastels in your collection, you're not going to reach for your pastels all that much, like girl, you don't need this palette. And you guys are right. I didn't need this palette. It's not like I think about this palette anymore. It's not like I regret not purchasing it. Looking at it now, I'm like, it is beautiful. I still think it's a beautiful palette. I've seen people create really pretty looks with this, but it's not a palette that I get the urge or the itch to go purchase even to this day. So that tells me it's a good thing I skipped it. Another product I think I was going to purchase during that Sephora VIB sale was one of the Gwen Stefani quads. And I really feel like I was buying into the hype of this just being a newly released brand. I feel like there was a very neutral leaning quad that I could get a lot of use out of. But ultimately I have so many other eyeshadow palettes, so many other quads. I have these shades everywhere. And I want to say the quads are like $28, which isn't like the most expensive. It's not like Tom Ford quality or Tom Ford pricing, if you will, but also $28 for a quad. Like I just didn't need to be spending that kind of money. This is another product I don't even like, I kind of forgot about, so that very much tells me that I was right in my decision in not purchasing that quad. And then the palette that we're gonna end with, as well as like an eye product that came out in the same collection, is from Hindash. It was his second palette that he launched, and he also launched a color fluid shadow in the shade Boy Tears, which looks truly so beautiful. And first of all, the palette is so expensive. It's like 6 shades, but they're like these like ombre shades, so you're supposed to be able to do like more than just like, it's technically more than just 6 eyeshadows. I wanted to try a Hindash product, and I just thought aesthetically the palette looked very like aesthetically pleasing and just like beautiful, but I really don't think I would have gotten a lot of use out of this palette, especially because it's like I look at the palette and I'm like, how would I even create like a look with this? Like it confuses me and my makeup mind as to like how I would have even used this palette. So I'm really glad I didn't waste over $70 purchasing this palette that likely would have gone virtually unused within my collection. And then on top of that, even looking at like this Boy Tears liquid shade, it looks so stinking beautiful. And if I were ever on like the Beautylish, which I think Hindash is available on Beautylish, if I was ever on the site ordering something, I could see myself like potentially popping this into the cart. But these are just not types of products I use that frequently, so it just doesn't make sense for me to be purchasing them. Although I do think this is one of the most beautiful like liquid eyeshadow shades I've ever seen, and I really kind of want to go purchase this as well. We're not doing that. I already failed at the beginning of this video. I'm not gonna go on and order this. It looks very beautiful, but I feel like I would purchase it, use it like a time or two. I feel like I would purchase it, use it like 3 or 4 times, review it, and then not think about it again. Like that would be what would happen. And I believe this product is like in the high 20s, maybe $30. Not worth it. it's a good thing I didn't buy it, and I just need to forget about it. All right, guys, so those were the 13, which ended up turning into only 12 releases that I skipped this year, seeing as I purchased a product at the beginning of this video. But those are the 12 makeup releases that I am really glad that I skipped this year. Releases that I was thinking about purchasing that I skipped. I would love to know what product launches come to your mind that you're glad that you skipped over in 2022. Let's chat about it in the comments below. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel as you guys always do, for supporting Vlogmas. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in tomorrow's video. Bye.